real, marathon.
What's your name?
Teage, T-E-A-G-E. Her first name.
Okay. So Teage, wow. Teage has an impressive bib. This is, you've been the coolest bib number of the day, Lord.
All right.
It's bib number 4.
4, all right.
Like, I can't even believe that's a real number.
Yeah, great.
I have not seen any single digit. So
there we go.
Who is Teage? Some kind of special...
I hope so. Yeah, I'm on the in the elite.
There's a lot of pressure with that bib number.
There is. Yeah.
Wow.
Why do people wear shoes? There are a lot of great reasons why people wear shoes. Fashion is a great one. Comfort is a great one. Warmth is a great one. But as barefoot running starts to gain prominence, people are going to have to start taking a stance.
What I realized is bare feet and free don't exist in our culture.
You can compare it to penicillin. It was an antibiotic. Well, finding out that we don't need shoes to run at this point of our lifetime is huge. It's $1 billion industry, shoe gear.
In the, sort of fisticuffs of all of that, there will be intelligent voices that are starting to ask deeper questions.
There's a whole sensory experience that's just unique to sort of your feet. So when you can feel the world and the earth through your feet, it's very different.
I feel anchored to the earth in my movements, and it just gives me a stronger sensation of depth within space.
There will be, research that will be done. There will be people challenging the research.
We found in a number of our studies that impacts seem to be related to injuries.
The impact, and in terms of the loading rate, there's not an appreciable difference.
And coming out of it, we'll hopefully have a deeper understanding. But we probably won't see a cultural shift until the old people die and their kids grow up.
Somebody's got to speak up. Somebody of authority and knowledge has to speak up, or you'll have more sheep following the other sheep and going off the cliff to their demise.
Now, I'm not going to say it's going to cure everything. It'd be silly for me to say that, but I really believe that if we get people back to running the way we're designed, just living the way we're designed to live. No, we're not going to go back in caves, and we're not going to not fly. But the more that we can incorporate some of that into our lives, I think the healthier we're going to be.
One of the writers I brought to Runner's World and the other sports and fitness magazines I did at Rodale was Chris McDougall. He came into my office one day and he said he wanted to write about this group of runners in the Copper Canyon of Mexico called the Tarahumara. Part of the story is this idea that the Tarahumara were running in huarachas, these sandals they made out of old car tires. And then he ended up writing this book, Born to Run, and a very important part of the book was this physiologist at Harvard who claimed that virtually or maybe even literally running barefoot could do good things for your running and for your body. So that's where this whole craze came out.
The reason we started studying it was that there was no literature, and the only research on barefoot running had been college students asked to take their shoes off. And I work in Kenya, and of course I've seen lots of people run barefoot. We thought, well, let's study how they run. And we were working on the manuscript, this 2010 paper, which was the big paper, the first major scientific paper on the topic, when Chris McDougall's book came out. And there's only like 10, 15 pages in the book on barefoot running. And of course, that became the story, and that's what sold the book to a lot of folks. And it kind of changed the discourse.
It was a great adventure yarn, and then it had this incredible man bites dog study. Shoe companies have been selling you shoes that injure you.
At the time that the barefoot running stuff was coming out, I was just finishing a book on the head, which only people who with PhDs would probably ever want to read. And on the other hand, we were getting in every newspaper on the planet, and journalists were calling. I mean, I couldn't handle all the calls about barefoot running.
We had this sort of collision of McDougall's book with Liebman's research in Nature magazine, and they both sort of appeared as the perfect storm at that time in an industry that was basically in an innovation vacuum and overcomplicating product.
It's like, okay, you have 3 types of feet. You're either pronated, high, neutral, or supinated, which is ridiculous. Like, the foot is not that simple that you have 3 templates, which is why I also don't like footwear being motion controlled, shock absorbing, neutral. That's oversimplifying a very complex structure that has a quarter of all the bones in the body.
The concept that you could run barefoot or that you might wear a very basic shoe was very appealing to a lot of runners. And I think it probably remains so to this day.
I think it got hyped up to a point where it probably over-exceeded what it should have been. But on the positive side, I think there were genuinely a lot of people that benefited from it.
I remember when I went to my first running event in Austin, and I saw people walking around in a Vibram 5 Fingers in the bathroom, and it was crazy. I'm like, what is going on here? And then Chris McDougall was there signing books, and that was the hottest thing in the world. The funny thing was, 2 years later, they were all gone, and everyone was walking around in Hokas in a giant shoe.
2012 minimalism really kind of hit its peak with the Born to Run book, and a lot of brands really jumped in. Vibram 5 Fingers really drove that, and unfortunately a pretty sharp drop off. I mean, today we're talking maybe 5% of the overall running market is barefoot minimalist. Some people would say it's still dying a slow death at this point.
I think the barefoot running craze right now is over. There's just no evidence to support that it's a good thing.
Of course, we had a barefoot running boom when Abebe Bikila won the Olympic marathon in 1960, and then Zola Budd came along 25 years later. Another 25 years later, now we got the other barefoot, so every 25 years we get this barefoot running fad coming along. It comes and it goes away.
It was funny. My reply usually was just, I was right all the time. All along, I was right. That was funny, because everybody suddenly would ask me about, what do you think about barefoot running? And I wasn't seen as a freak anymore. I was seen as an expert.
When they would do a news story about barefoot running, it was an eccentricity. And since there was nothing to buy, there's no story. It's just an eccentric, you need a commodity to have it become meaningful.
It connects to you, right? People say, well, why don't you step on glass all the time or sharp rocks? Well, a couple things. First, you become much more aware of your surroundings when you're barefoot or I'll show you my shoes if you want. You can't land hard, and you are much more aware of everything. And that goes far beyond your next step. You're more aware of the sounds, you're more aware of the ground that's underneath you. I think of barefoot running like if you're holding your love's hand, but you never hold their hand without a glove on. And then you take that glove off, and that kind of connection and that sort of intimacy you feel of actual holding their hand for the first time, and that feeling of that skin is very different than if you shake someone's hand with a glove on.
I've always had in the back of my head wanting to qualify in the marathon for the U.S. Olympic trials. And I've gone back and forth with injury and health and motivation over the years. And so I haven't always had that in my head as like a realistic possibility. But the last couple of years has been trying to transition my thinking around running to the point where I'm like back in that place of momentum where the U.S. Olympic trials is a realistic possibility. So the last couple years, I've been trying to enter races that have higher levels of competition and just sort of familiarizing myself with like a different level of competition than I had been in the previous years where I'd just been doing local races.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And so I set my goal for the 2020 trials. So it was this long-term vision that I could sort of set in the future and say, okay, everything that I do today is going to be geared up towards racing at different events that will set me up to hit a qualifying time so that in 2020 I'll be able to run at the trials. My propensity to land heel first or toe first, it shifts back and forth based on speed, on terrain. It's not one thing fits all. I would say that there was definitely a shift towards more of a like springy toe motion for more of my gaits when I started training more intensely and consistently barefoot. Yeah.
I would say 50% of my training, which is roughly 7 hours a week, is done completely barefoot. It just feels good. I feel that there's just the natural alignment that my body gravitates towards, and I've completed all of my longer distances, including my transcontinental run experience in Lunas, though there was 1,000 miles that I did participate barefoot for that transcontinental run.
If we went out there on any given day and filmed 1,000 or 5,000 different people, you would see the most astonishing variety of running form you could possibly imagine. And for a large number of them, it probably is suiting them perfectly well.
Nobody had the courage to say there is a correct way to run. These other ways of running are wrong. If you were a swim coach and somebody came and they were swimming and the palm of their hand was going in the water first, and you said, this is the incorrect way to swim, and they said, well, that's just the way they swim, you would drop that person as somebody you were coaching.
Barefoot running is merely an opportunity to perfect your running skill. It's easier to run with skill when you have less crap between your foot and the ground.
With barefoot, what happens? Number one, we decrease our stride length. We tend to avoid hitting the heel, so we run more in our forefoot than the rear foot. And we also will pre-activate our calf muscles so that when we hit, we land on our forefoot and don't let the heel hit initially.
Assuming there's some perfect or ideal form and you're not barefoot, it's impossible to reach that form unless you have a minimal shoe. It doesn't mean you will get it. It's impossible to get it if you have a traditional shoe.
Minimal shoes, in my opinion, is just a rubber sole and something to keep it on the foot. So there is no heel counter, there is no arch support, there is no stack height, there is no heel to toe drop.
The barefoot aficionados try to say, well, it's the running shoes that are causing you not to run forefoot with the thick heel that it allows you to run heel toe.
It changes the way everything works. It shortens the Achilles, it shortens the plantar fascia, it lifts the heel up, it changes the place of initial contact so that it's more likely to overstride. It prevents all the intrinsic muscles from the foot from working.
Well, that doesn't make sense either, because the big thick midsoles on shoes really came into being in the late 1970s. Are they saying that all of the runners were forefoot runners before that? I'm not sure that you could say that.
So let's imagine that there is a species-specific way to run. I believe Homo sapiens should run a certain way. You need the hardware to match the software. I want a hunter-gatherer running technique with a hunter-gatherer foot, because if there's a mismatch, there's a problem.
It's very clear that number one, a lot of elite runners are river strikers. Number two, most runners choose a river strike in shoes. So to say that everyone should be midfoot striking and forefoot striking doesn't make any sense.
Ever since I've started doing research, which is in about 1975, 76, I've not found very many forefoot runners. And in fact, one of the later papers found less than 1% were true forefoot runners.
The skeptics say, Irene, if you look out in the world, 90% of runners in shoes are heel strikers. How can you say that's not normal? That's what they say. And there's nothing wrong with heel striking.
Out of all the research projects that have actually videotaped people in races, in thousands, we're looking at about 89% of the people are rear foot strikers and about less than 1% are forefoot strikers.
I agree, the barefooters probably have some heel striking and midfoot striking and all of that. I think we use a variety of strike patterns, but if you look at the predominance of it, if they're running at a constant velocity, it's going to be predominantly on the ball of their foot or maybe a flat, but with most of their weight. You don't want to get that impact.
Why would we want to land with 2 or 3 times body weight on the most delicate part of our foot when we have the calcaneus, which is a huge rugged bone? Look at the foot structure. And logically, if you didn't know anything about running and looked at the foot and say, where would you want to land? And it wouldn't be on the forefoot.
By landing on the front of the feet, you have all the natural cushion that you need. And so if you're looking to a shoe for something that you don't really need, then you're running the risk of interacting with technology in a way that creates weakness rather than strength.
When you apply force to the ground pushes back at you with the equal and opposite force. It's Newton's third law. You have this impact peak followed by this propulsive peak when you land on your heel.
And that's what the modern jogger looks like. These long strides, the massive heel strike. Because the padded shoe has taken away that proprioceptive, nociceptive, which is the pain signal.
And when you have that impact, it's like getting hit very hard and very quickly, as opposed to having a load applied more gently to the body.
When you have an impact, that shock radiates all the way through your body, all the way up to your head. What has to happen is your body has to attenuate that shock. You can't get rid of it. It's there and it does radiate up. Whether you're a forefoot runner or a rear foot runner, you have a shock and it still gets to the head and you still attenuate it. It's just that you attenuate it differently.
When you don't land on your heel, your force looks like this. And it's nice and smooth. And this is associated with a very quick rise to peak and can be related to the development of injuries. When you give a very quick impulsive load, that it causes damage to bone and to cartilage. We do things naturally to try to counter that. But when you put cushioning under the heel, you don't feel it.
You take away the pain signal, you don't take away the force. The forces are still acting on your body, you just don't feel them anymore.
Now you would have way more impact if you land on your heel without cushioning, no doubt. But what happens is when you land without cushioning, you don't want to land on your heel.
80% of the receptors on the bottom of the foot are sensitive to vibration, which means the most important, your nervous system, our nervous system was designed for bipedal locomotion. To maintain the stability and the load and the unload of bipedal locomotion is being able to detect how hard you're striking the ground. That's vibration.
Between 32 and 82% of runners will get hurt at some point in their career, and half of runners get hurt each and every year. And that's astounding. Football doesn't have injury rates that high. Rugby doesn't have injury rates that high.
We have essentially accepted in Western society that if you run, you will have injuries to your knees, injuries to your hips, even injuries to your feet, broken bones. And that's normal. And as a matter of fact, it's become a badge of honor.
There's only 2 studies that I know of, large epidemiological studies, both found exactly the same results. That the risk of injury was no different between forefoot runners and rearfoot runners. The location of the injury was different, and the type of injury was different, but the actual numbers were the same.
We don't see the heel pain issue so much with minimalist people, but yet we see stress fractures and a lot of forefoot injuries.
The people that are saying there's increased rates of stress fractures from minimalist shoes. There's increased rates of stress fractures from improper training. And that improper training may be running in a minimalist shoe when you're not used to one.
You can't just blanket say every runner, no matter what type of foot they have, or no matter how big they are, or what their sex is, or whatever, should run minimalist or barefoot 50% of the time. You just can't make statements like that. It's a very individual thing.
In the Western society, I think it's all about immediate gratification, and I want to go and run barefoot now, and if it doesn't work, it's bad for me. I think barefoot running got a bad rap because of people rushing into it and going into it too fast and not being precautionary.
So the foot actually becomes stronger through the minimal footwear, and we know this, and barefoot running, but you have to stress it and then back off. Take 48 hours off.
It's not the shoe or it's not barefoot, it's the nature of running, which is repetitive. And there is a thing called cumulative repetitive load, and the human body hates cumulative repetitive load, and it responds very badly to that by tissue breaking down.
If you believe it's something we needed to do to survive and evolve, which I believe, then it shouldn't hurt. It doesn't make sense in an evolutionary light that doing something that we need to do would hurt. If everyone started off now barefoot and running barefoot, I honestly think I'd be out of business.
Recommending it as a rehabilitation from injury, or recommending it as a method of running for everybody, I think is wrong. And that's what my research has shown.
We wanted to rediscover our natural weediness, to be tough and resilient, and that's the trade-off.
Would it be more convenient if I could wear shoes? Absolutely. I'm not going to deny the convenience of it, especially in the winter, especially when there's ice and slush. I'm sure that other barefoot runners will admit that too. Would it be more convenient? Of course. But if I can run pain-free, that trumps convenience any day of the week. And anyone that's run in pain will agree. I tell people to experiment, to find what works for them.
You can run well in boots and running shoes or barefoot, and you can run terribly barefoot or in shoes and boots. It's not the shoes or the boots or being barefoot that makes you run well. It's how you use your body.
I got injured, I think 2.5 or 3 weeks ago, and had to take 4 days off from running, and then had 3 days much shorter and slower than I had anticipated. And coming off of that, I felt really sluggish, but then kept increasing my mileage once I was healthy enough to run again. I've been at 90 to 95 pretty much every week, and getting stronger, getting healthier. And yeah, it's nice running, increasing mileage, and then also feeling like I'm getting healthier and stronger. So I feel great about Chicago. I'm really hoping to be under 223, and to run under 223 and have it feel easy, if that makes sense. I know it's not going to be easy to run sub 223, but to feel calm and relaxed and mentally like it wasn't a huge struggle for me. Barefoot running is a way of removing these novocaines or barriers to experience. So I would say that Running for me is joyous, regardless of whether I have shoes on or I don't. Running for me barefoot is joyful in this totally unique way where I'm alive in my connection to every step.
Being mindful, it's a very great practice to tune into what your vehicle is asking of you in that moment. Maybe it's very subtle. Maybe it's asking you to just calm your breathing down. Maybe it's asking you to soften your eye gaze. Maybe it's asking you to engage your hips. Maybe it's asking you to land lightly because of the impact that it's feeling in its quads.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go! Good luck! God bless.
There are plenty of commodities that I need and value, and I'm not advocating being off the grid or anything. But I think the infrastructure for market culture surrounds us 24/7 and invites us to go buy the right thing or work hard enough so that you have the purchasing power to buy the right thing. And I think anything that reminds you that there's other stuff going on is interesting and possibly life-giving.
First modern running shoe, if you look at most accounts, is the Nike Cortez in 1972. So before that time, they didn't exist.
When you look at the running shoe industry, it really kind of took off right around the time the running boom started, which would have been around the time Frank Shorter and Dave Wallow won those gold medals in the '72 Olympics.
The changes in the shoe industry by 1980 or thereabouts corresponded with this increased rate of injuries.
You have to think that if there were a lot of injuries before, someone would be reporting it. It just makes sense. That's when things get into the literature. So Nike invited 3 pretty well-known sports podiatrists, and they all came to Nike and they said, you know what, we think this is because people have too much pronation, too much motion, and too much impact. There was no real data to support that, and I'm sure that's what they thought. So they started to make these motion control to control the motion and cushioning shoes, and that's how it happened.
When we started getting the shoes that were thicker sole with more cushioning, we said, wow, that's great for training on asphalt and cement, which we did a lot, because it made it easier on your quadriceps and your knees and your ankles. It just seemed to take the stress off.
And then it got more and more and more and more motion control, more and more cushioning.
I don't think there was a hidden agenda. You know, it's not like podiatrists or shoe stores or people that manufacture orthotics were saying, you know, we know that these aren't helping people, we're going to have them use them anyway. I don't think it was anything like that.
Those good, flat, what is called today minimalist shoes, which back in 1980, they were just basically all the shoes. Those shoes were becoming dinosaurs.
No matter what promise of technology is in that shoe or in that marketing campaign, if that shoe is not going to be positioned like a natural foot, I don't believe it. I don't believe that you can pinch the toes, lift the heel, unlock the arch, and then do something inside of that shoe to create health. I think it's impossible.
I mean, and you look at even the way medically we're taught, okay, my shoulders hurt, here's my shoulder program, my hips hurt, knee program. But no one ever talks about, okay, well, my foot's hurt, here's my foot strengthening program, that's foot hurt, here's your foot orthotic. I mean, it makes absolutely no anatomic sense, and there's no literature to support that it's a good thing. I take the null hypothesis. My null hypothesis is the human's pretty well designed as is.
They don't weaken feet. That's all. That's not been shown in research. That's just someone's idea that they're throwing out, and other people are picking up on the internet, and they're hearing lectures, and they like to believe it because they're the ones that say, oh, we should do gait retraining, or we should be doing foot strengthening exercises because that's more natural and, you know, gets us away from shoes and orthotics.
We don't pick up on what's happening, we don't link it to the shoe, we wait till it's broken, and then we offer an outdated, archaic method of fixing it, which doesn't really fix it.
Shoes do not cause injuries. They may be a factor in the injury, but they do not cause injuries. And they do not cause you to change the way you run.
It's made up. like so many things. If you look at the work of Dr. Craig Richards in Australia, he went to look at the technologies that are built into footwear, and he went to look for those double-blinded studies, and he didn't find them. We thought we were making a scientific recommendation when in reality we were pushing a well-intentioned thought process.
There's nothing that points in any manner that our foot needs a shoe, or a shoe as you and I have grown to know them in terms of athletic shoes or running shoes.
That's why I like minimal footwear, what I would call smart footwear, because it decreases that delay that exists between the person and the environment. So we become a little bit more natural, or just more, our nervous system is just sequenced the way that it should be.
You have to look at the individual in that case, and you can't recommend that for everybody. And that's my problem, is that they do recommend it for everybody. It's just the same way I would never say to someone, there's one type of running shoes, and these are the only running shoes you should ever use. That's bad too.
If you put thick cushioned shoes on the foot, you further block that vibration information that you need to, one, know how hard you're striking the ground, but also for movement efficiency and to maintain your stability. So it's huge.
So being barefoot in a minimal shoe helps you keep that sense, that tactile sense there. So that's about health, not about running injuries.
I had a conversation with Amby Barefoot, who had won, one of my heroes. He'd won the Boston Marathon in 1968, and he was at the time the editor of Runner's World. And I said, what's amazing is that I just ran 20 miles yesterday and my feet don't hurt, I feel great. What's the padding for? And here's the editor of Runner's World running these shoe reviews that talk about padding, padding, padding. And he said, you don't really need padding. And it's like, what? And just, the guy completely blew my mind. And I remember my next question is, why are we doing this? Why are we running these reviews with padding? And he said, people want the padding. The runners want it. That didn't strike me as being entirely accurate.
I believe that every runner has to figure out what works for them. And I think some runners do better in thickly cushioned shoes than they do in thinly cushioned shoes, and vice versa.
I think the market is really effective in teaching us that there are certain needs we have that are endless.
As far as running shoe companies and the shoes they've been producing for 50 years now, or at least 40, marketing to a mass market, I think that they have produced a ton of bad shoes over the years, but have only gotten better in the process.
We have been sold a bill of goods, and marketing to these companies is amazing. We fall for it. How stupid are we?
I remember as a 5-year-old getting my Keds, and I think they had a tagline, run faster, jump higher with Keds. And I'm 5 years old, and so I believe they know what they're talking about.
There's a pair of smart youngsters. Hi, kids.
Hi, kiddo.
Say, why do you kids wear Keds?
So I can run faster and jump farther. So I can win more often.
So I proceeded to go to the backyard and jump into a pit that my neighbor had dug because there was some water problems. And it was about 6 foot deep. And I'm 5 years old. Guess what? I couldn't get out.
Those shot proof arches sure are neat. The right support for growing feet. So be a champion athlete. Kids.
The first thing they do when they start a sport is to get the best shoe they can afford, because that tells them that they are actually going to be good at the sport. Not that it's going to be that way.
The pressure is really being put on the people who are sort of promoting the minimal approach, but they haven't really proven that the other shoes have done anything either. And all of these anatomical arches and kinetic wedges and all of those things, what are they doing for injury? I don't know. There's no randomized control studies. There's nothing like that.
As a whole, the only fad is from the late 70s up until about the mid 2000s, those shoes were the fad.
I think the shoes that you can twist like a pretzel, it's like running barefoot. You might as well run barefoot or in your slippers. we need some support and cushion, and we're not, and those shoes aren't giving it to you.
I gave a grand rounds, which is like the hospital presentation at University of Colorado. This is like 2005, challenging everything about running shoes. I had, here's the Runner's World shoe test, you know, don't let it roll up, don't let it twist, that's a good shoe. And then I took the shoe I'd been running in and it was in my pocket.
We've created a planet of disabled people because of the shoes that people think they need to wear.
We're finding out that shoes aren't making a difference in regards to running. And the shoe industry has proven it. As much as they did say the minimalist shoes are a fad, they've proven it because shoes have changed and have evolved into what's now more flexibility and less stability, and they're being marketed that way.
If you would go back on Google and look up shoe wall from 2003, right, and just get a snapshot of the wall back then, look at a snapshot of the wall today, you will see a complete paradigm shift in shoes across the board. You know, not only did the one model from, you know, a certain shoe company change 10%, their entire line has made categorical shifts.
Before, if you wanted a shoe that had a low heel, you had to go to a racing flat that was thin, and now we have actually training shoes like the Ultra and the Hoka shoes that have thicker soles and have a low heel drop.
The industry, you know, again, likes to kind of say, oh look, minimalism came and gone. Well, you know what? It came and it influenced everything you've done from that time forward.
My plan is to go out and stay with the leaders and convince myself that I belong up there, and then hang with it as long as possible and hope that the weather affects other people more than it affects me. Tomorrow's race I'm excited about, but I'm only excited about it in that it's another opportunity where I just get to go out and run. And I get to run every single day, but it's not every day that I get to push my body into a different place where my body then controls my brain, whereas usually it's the other way around.
Teage O'Connor, Burlington guy, Teage O'Connor. Way to go, Teage. Let's make some noise for these runners as they come back around. And we hope you can all make it down.
I'm super excited. I have no attachment to my expectations for the race. I want to compete and I want to push myself, but I don't care if I get first, I don't care if I get 30th, I don't care if I break 225 or break 220. I just want to go out, have fun, and be aware of my body being physically exerted. Yeah.
When you train in Vermont, 3 weeks ago, I think it was 20 degrees. So, and then 3 weeks later, here we are, it's 80 degrees. So a real testament to those runners coming across the finish line from Vermont. Won't you give it up for Teage O'Connor? 2 hours, 35 minutes, 17 seconds. Teage, come on over here, because you know I want to talk with you. I don't know how many of you saw Teage come across the finish line, but Teage stood out because take a look down here. Teage doesn't have any shoes on. When did you take the shoes off and why?
I ran, I think, the last 2.5 miles without shoes. My feet hurt, so I feel better running barefoot, so I did.
So this is something you've done before, you run without shoes?
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, Teage O'Connor from Burlington, Vermont. 2 hours, 35 minutes, and 17 seconds.
There's a woodworker, Jim Tolpin, who says the more electricity that you use in woodworking, the further away you get from the wood, which is totally true. And with running, the more technology you use, the further you get away from the base experience of running.
I trained barefoot in one particular environment, which was a local golf course. I would go over and take my shoes off, just the softness of the ground underfoot. It was a very tactile, very massage-like, very sensuous feeling when the course was a little bit damp.
In real time, you're feeling that impact per footfall, per touch, But there's also something going on inside where you're interpreting and giving meaning, prescribing meaning to what that impact feels like within the body.
I love nothing more than running myself to absolute exhaustion on that golf course, finishing a run and just going, doing a somersault onto my back and just laying there heaving. You felt that you were in the embrace of the world, particularly the green world, when you did that.
Our bodies were built to be able to do this. We've got long legs, we can sweat, we can run in the heat. That was where I started when I started running, was why do I love this sport? And why am I enjoying running? And why has this really hooked me in this way? And that's kind of where I found Daniel Lieberman's work and the whole idea that, yeah, humans, I think, are born to run.
Yes, of course, we're born to run, we're evolved to run, however you want to put it. I mean, humans have evolved over millions of years so many adaptations that are for endurance running. And our bodies are loaded with features that are specific for running, that improve our ability to do long distance running. Just from an anatomical and biomechanical perspective, there's nothing to argue about. We have all kinds of features that make us superlative at this, for which there is no other explanation. For millions of years, the job of a human being was to combine being a naturalist and an athlete and a member of a cooperative society. That's how we were hunter-gatherers for millions of years, and that's what hunter-gatherers do.
Dan Lieberman tries to focus this on what people did 50,000 years ago. He says, well, they didn't wear shoes then. Why should we wear shoes now? And that's a gross oversimplification as far as I'm concerned.
What's probably changed the most in our lives is diet and exercise. What we eat is a far cry from what we used to eat. And how we exercise has changed profoundly. Most people today can get up in the morning, and between when they wake up in the morning and when they go to bed, never have to break a sweat, never have to raise their heart rate, never have to do anything that involves any physical activity of any intense sort.
The feeling of running, the joy, the exuberance, which sometimes hurts and is always a lot of work, that's how we evolved to feel. And all the aches and complaints of civilization are not our natural environment.
There's a mismatched theory of evolution that says that we are not living the lives that our bodies were designed for, or evolved for today. And we have changed our lifestyle way quicker than our bodies can keep up.
People are physically inactive, and they spend very little energy and very little time doing stuff. I would guess that it's probably about 400 calories a day difference between now and just 2 generations ago. 400 calories a day times 365 days a year is a lot of calories. We're talking enough to run 50 marathons at least. So we have changed our relationship to our bodies so fast that we don't even understand it at this point. What it does to our brains, what it does to our backs, what it does to our feet, what it does to our legs.
The idea is, maybe we're not matching our lifestyle to the way that we're designed, and I extend it to running. And the way I extend it to running is, we clearly know that when you put a cushioned heel on somebody, they start heel striking. And that when you take it away and give them a chance to accommodate to it, so habitual barefoot runners do not. And that heel strike makes all the difference in the world, in my opinion.
Hitting the ground with an impact force is not a bad thing. We actually take that gravitational force, that energy, and we temporarily store it in our tendons, not just the Achilles, but all the other tendons. And then we turn that energy into mechanical energy to propel us forward. What an amazing thing. And if we interfere with that, we don't run as fast. And one of the things shoes does, it interferes with that.
I put my ballet shoes on and I went for a run, and I had 0 pain. And I could just keep running and running and running, and I had 0 pain. And I thought, well, why in the world would I run in shoes when I can run forever with no pain? I am not interested in physical exercise for fitness per se. I'm interested because I want to see what happens when you push your body to the point where you get to this sort of gray area. A sort of psychological experiment. what happens when you go beyond your limits? And I thought, well, a 50 mile will probably do it. I was happy to do it. I was proud to finish. I was sad because it didn't go to my limit. And I thought, oh God, I'm not done. I thought, now, when you push yourself, when you try something where there is a high rate of failure and you don't know what's gonna happen, to me, that's where the fun begins. That's why I did it. I wanted to see what would happen.
I think that's pretty much it. So I want to eat every like 20 to 30 minutes or so, and then everything will be on the go. So I'll take a water bottle. I won't make you guys work for it. I'll probably run a full lap with it, and then finish it. The spreadsheet has all the laps. I want to start at like exactly 5 with cell phone time. Should we go? Good luck, Teague. All right, someone who's our official timer can call it out.
Oh, countdown, 3, 2, 1,
Yeah.
go. 3, 2, 1, go.
All right, Teague.
Good job, Teague. 137.
Looks like you have a hitchhiker or something.
138.
Was that 138 high or 138?
138. 8. Okay.
So that made it the longest I've run.
Can I tell him that or not?
It was like 65.
Sure.
You're at a 640 overall, including the potty break.
Started looking more into it.
Embrace it.
Yeah. I feel alive.
I really want to probably jump in and do the rest of it, but I would probably not be able to run for this.
Would it be really good?
Yeah. What was it?
Running is a visceral experience, and shoes are a numbing agent in that experience, which serve their purpose in various ways. But if you remove shoes, you add a sensory component to it. And if you add headphones, you remove a sensory experience. One of my favorite things is to go out and run when it's extremely cold and to feel cold, and to go out in the extreme heat and to feel the extreme heat. And being sheltered from these things numb or at least diminish the range of experiences and feelings that you get to derive from your interactions with the world.
Using shoes is still a very effective tool, but to rely on it all the time can easily muffle that feedback that the body is asking and is providing you in the real time. And it can kind of take away that intuition that getting that real-time feedback without anything on your feet can provide you.
Reconnecting to that incredibly complex hardware that is literally hardwired into your brain and memory probably isn't a bad idea.
It's like natural food. Okay, eat real food and your odds of getting these metabolic diseases are less. Treat the body as it's designed, stand up, don't sit. I mean, look at, modern industrial world. I mean, we've, engineered everything natural out of, the body.
I think that in our society, we have gotten dangerously far away from our animal selves. And I know that sounds cliche, but I see road runners and they have headphones on and they have Garmin's on and they have heart rate monitors on. And I wonder, do they feel the sense of freedom that I feel when I'm barefoot on the trails and I'm running through mud? Or the best thing in the entire world, highly recommend everyone try it, is running on moss. I just believe that there's a deep part of us that remembers a time when walking and running was most of our day, and that it can give someone a sense of inspiration or hope that maybe they never had.
That for me is the essence of why I'm here, is to live a meaningful life. And running barefoot in that spiritual sense adds meaning to my life, and therefore I can add meaning to other people's lives. And for me, that's the answer to the why. It gives you a bond with nature in a way. Running on grass, running maybe trails barefoot that you can actually, it's a sense of freedom that I don't think you get in any other facet of life.
Moving your legs if you can. We're pumping the blood for you. Yes!